3rd October 2024. That, in the meantime, a conservatory order is hereby issued restraining the respondents by themselves, their agents, and all servants from implementing the new higher education funding model until the hearing and determination of this petition. 26th February 2025. Justice Chachamuita said, "I'm not persuaded that there is merit in granting the application. Therefore, the application dated January 27th, 2025 is declined and dismissed." Yes, this is a short life, or should I say, the little history of the new funding model in Kenya. But exactly where did it arise? Where did it arise? It was introduced in May 2023 by His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Ruto. From there, it included scholarships, loans, and household contributions. But of course, what really made the government to change the old funding model? The number one reason is the underfunding of the universities. It is important to note that the universities are controlled in terms of funding by a universities fund board. This board sits down and allocates this money to these universities. It is also important to note that by 2022, the government, the public universities in Kenya had accumulated a debt of 75 billion shillings. Imagine 75 billion shillings out of debt. And therefore, this was getting out of hand. As a matter of fact, some universities were projected to close and crumble because of this higher debt. And therefore, something had to be made. And that's why the government came up with this new funding model. But of course, with a lot of fair share of problems. It is also important to note that just very recently, the Private University Association came up saying that the government owes them 50 billion shillings that in arrears because they have been training students who have been placed in the universities under government sponsorship without getting um, little or no money at all from the government. The second reason why the government came up with this change is to introduce the means testing system. But how are we to understand this system? Let's compare the two models, the old versus the new. And then we'll conclude by reading this statement from the president that was given last year on the 29th of August. So, traditionally, the funding mechanism was a block. The government will send this money. Allow me to read, then I explain it in very brief here. That traditionally, the government would have block funding via the DUC. The DUC is the differentiated unit cost, the cost per program. Okay. But the new model has changed to scholarship, loans, and the household contributions. Again, in the past, there was a uniform allocation. And then currently, there's what we call a means testing instrument, which is commonly known as bands, band 1, band 2, all the way to band 5. Then at the past, we had the main government support, which included 80% or even more. But currently, the government is doing way less. And then we have the help, which is the loans, and then we have the households. So, what exactly is the main difference here? Take, for instance, high school. In high school, we have, regardless of your background, the government pays money for you, and it is paid in bulk. It is a uniform allocation, and it is block funding, what people called capitation. Okay, so irrespective of what or where you come from, the amount of money that the government pays per student is equal, and that's what used to happen in the university. That, of course, with a little variations of the course, it was the same money and it was a uniform allocation. But in this case, the government sits down and says, no, we don't have to do that. Let's divide people according to what they can pay. So let's have student A, who is coming from a good background, pay, let's say, a course costs 100,000. Let these students pay even up to 70,000. Maybe the government can pay 10 or 15, and then they can be given 5,000 for the loan, and so forth and so on. So that's what is the main difference between the old versus the new funding model. And of course, just to reiterate that according to the government, the old funding model was almost destroying our education because it assumed that all courses were the same. It also assured that the government had the money to pay 80% for everybody when it did not, and the results were disastrous, as I have explained before. But this has not had its own fair share of problems. It has had lots of misfortunes. And which are these misfortunes? So, as we have said, the model was launched on May that 2023. Fast forward, it went pretty 4 months, and a few days later, a coalition, you know, came up, and this was including the Kenya Human Rights Commission, the Elimubora Working Group, Boaz Waruku, and the Students Caucus. They petitioned the court and citing issues of discrimination, the lack of adequate public participation, and the violation of statutory provisions. Okay, and the court accepted that indeed. Let's look at this case. And a whole year later, you see, this is October 13th, 2023, December 20th, 2024, a whole year later, the court came out guns blazing and said that, you know what, actually, this is indeed unconstitutional. And therefore, they sent the government back to the drawing board because the government had two options: either to go to the Court of Appeal and appeal that particular ruling, or go back to the drawing board and come up with a new funding model. But government, as it is, probably has decided to go on to the Court of Appeal. And just as to wait, because that again might take an year or two. So just as they wait for that court now, for that case to be heard and determined, they came on, that is the COOPS, which is still a body under the government, the Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Placement Service, came on and said, you know what, we actually need to place these guys who have completed Form 4 just recently. So allow us to have a stay application. We know you have said that it is unconstitutional, but allow us to have a stay application. Let us continue this new funding model so that we can be able to send these students to university. But what did the court say? So here came Justice Chacha Mwita and said, in the circumstances, I am not persuaded that there is a merit in granting the application. Public interest, in my respective view, is better served when everyone acts within the law. Consequently, and for the above reasons, the application dated 27th January 2025 is declined and dismissed. End of quote. Okay. Further, I went on to state that the government has a constitutional responsibility to fund public universities. Passing this burden on to the parents is a violation of the constitution. And therefore, this forms part of the bulk why this court ruling was actually, um, you know, upheld even when they came for a stay application. And therefore, that stay was denied, and therefore the ruling being reaffirmed in this particular case on the 5th, February 26, 2025. And the next question is, what are the effects? What are the effects really? And the first one is the uncertainty in the admissions of the 2024 candidates, because that was the main reason of the stay order. They wanted a stay order so that they can be able to admit these students. So what next for them? The government is still in quagmire. And of course, the government in its role keeps on giving people hope, which is good, that indeed they will do everything that it takes to ensure that students will get to the university in time. That one, we sit down and see what they're going to do, because they cannot continue with the new funding model because of the court ruling, and they have to come up with a way to see that. So that is something that we shall sit down and wait, and of course, time will tell. And as we can see that they may opt to change the cutoff points, which the cabinet secretary has declined, and they have said that no, we are not changing the overall cutoff points. Anyone who got a C plus will get an opportunity to get to the university, but they can decide to change the cutoff points for the course based. For instance, if they were supporting 50 students in a certain university to study medicine, they may opt, okay, let's reduce the number. I don't want to give an exact number, but let's reduce the number because we don't have the money, and so forth and so on. The next effect is that we also have the challenge with the current first years, because they are in the funding model, and information that the Kenyan student has is that some universities have even opted to tell their students just to continue learning without asking them for those fees, because they are also in confusion. The other challenge is the cost of reverting back to the old system, because if you were to revert back to the old system, then that means a lot of cost which they don't have at the moment. Okay, and therefore, at the end, don't forget to subscribe to the Kenyan student as we wait to give you more information. So why subscribe? Because you'll get more insights as this thing continue to rise up. We're going to continue giving you updates, and once the portal is open, we're going to give you a one-on-one basis, a one to go video so that you can be able to apply to your courses to the very end. And finally, it when you subscribe, it is able to push it to more people. YouTube will be able to take it to more people, and more people will be able to be able to get to this particular knowledge. So best wishes and all the best.